Good evening, everyone. This is another episode of E2KG. It's episode 9 for our deep dives. We're going to cover the week of September 3rd through 7th, talk some gaming. It's kind of, we're getting off to a late start. We've had some technical difficulties, but in typical E2KG fashion, we're going to just keep tilting at the windmills and and soldier on. So we'll do our best. Tonight with me, I have Osiris Prime. How are you, Prime?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm gonna let Agasicles continue on social media. He rounds out our trio, and but the cool thing about tonight is it's actually a topic that favors my perspective on gaming, and it'll be fun to hear Agasicles rant about it because we got a couple of news stories that are a little bit surprising given the current gaming zeitgeist, and they deal with the long narrative-driven experiences. My daughter had some history homework today. She was reading about the Sumerians and the Epic of Gilgamesh, and somehow in my brain I put those two together. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh of gaming. The Epic of Gaming Gamesh. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to catch on, Prime.
That's not going to do it? No? Okay. Well, you tried. Well, the first story kind of goes along with it because that's kind of epic in our first story here.
Let's see what we got.
We were talking
about the THQ Nordic.
Yeah.
All right. We got THQ Nordic. So we got THQ Nordic buys Kingdoms of Amalur franchise. So we got this from IGN. THQ Nordic has purchased the Kingdoms of Amalur franchise from 38 Studios. The company has finalized a deal to acquire Kingdoms of Amalur and the Amalur property based on the abandoned Copernicus MMORPG. Back when Kurt Schilling, former Major League pitcher, and I guess he was a big EverQuest fan. So he was like a legit gamer, and he retired and he started a studio in Rhode Island, 38 Studios, 38 being his number, of course, when he played. And they got together some big names. So they had Todd McFarlane to help create some characters. I think they had R.A. Salvatore, and he helped write the story. And if you've ever read the Drizzt Do'Urden, I hope I didn't mangle that, but I did read one of the trilogies. No, you're not a Dungeons and Dragons Forgotten Realms fan, Prime?
No, I never read those.
You're shaking your head quizzically
because I never heard of those.
There's been like 20 novels on Drizzt.
Sorry,
he's a black elf, but he's a dark elf, but he's a good guy, so it's pretty cool. He's kind of a Mary Sue, a la
Ray,
the girl in the new Star Wars. Ray, yeah. That's it.
Your favorite. Yeah. All right, let's stop right there because we don't want to go on any tangents.
All right. Anyway, so we had R.A. Salvatore. So these Drizzt books have sold a lot. Prime's not a fan, but there are a lot of fans out there. And Ken Rolston from Elder Scrolls 4 fame. So they assembled this really cool team, and they built a game, Kingdoms of Amalur, and I think it got pretty good reviews back in the day. Problem is, it didn't sell as well as it needed to, and the company took a big loan out from the state of Rhode Island, and then the state of Rhode Island kind of was like, and everything fell apart. So
let's also understand when you take a loan out from the state of Rhode Island, that's kind of like I got an offer you can't refuse kind of loan, right? So, just so we're clear about Rhode Island politics.
That might have been half their budget too, I think, maybe for that year.
They were, yeah. So despite the cool from a gamer perspective and a nerd perspective. It was on thin ice from the get-go. You know, they needed a mega hit, and they didn't get it, and it all died out. So I guess the IP has just been sitting there waiting to be picked up, and THQ Nordic purchased it. There's no indications yet whether or not they you know, what they're planning or anything like that. It's not like they purchased it and were like, oh yeah, we're going to develop a sequel. It's just they have the IP, they have the rights. So this was Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and yeah, it's one of these epic RPG type games. So the next story. Anyone here a big Cyberpunk 2077 fan want to do the next story? Gascles, you want to take that on?
No, man. You are a resident Cyberpunk 2077 fan.
Oh man, this is not good then. All right, so yeah, I guess I'm the only guy here that actually likes The Witcher, so I should do this.
I like The Witcher. I played it.
Yeah, let's not extrapolate that far.
I never said I didn't like The Witcher.
I just mean you're the biggest fan that's on the current roster of co-hosts.
Okay, so somebody picked this up from Games Radar and put it in the lineup. Cyberpunk 2077 aiming to have about as many quests as The Witcher 3, so a lot. Maybe the scope of Cyberpunk 2077 seems limited compared to The Witcher 3. Developer CD Projekt Red is going from several sprawling regions of a fantasy continent to a single near-future city, and the switch to a first-person's perspective certainly seems to favor smaller, denser spaces. But however it works out on a square-mile basis, not to mention all those skyscrapers, Cyberpunk 2077's mission ambitions are just as grand as its predecessor, according to a new interview with Quest designer Patrick Mills published on Metro. So basically, he said, "I can't talk about numbers, but I'd like to look. I'd look at Witcher 3. Something like Witcher 3 is what we're aiming for." So, according to the article, there's over 400 quests in The Witcher 3. So Cyberpunk 2077 is aiming to be a big game, and I think that was what helped Gascles and DBQ, who's not joining us, but contributes as always to our our plan, our agenda for the night. What we're targeting for our discussion. So this game's looking like it's going to be long. I mean, as I said, for Witcher 3, it's hundreds of hours. If you want to get 100% complete, we have another game, Kingdoms of Amalur. The IP was picked up because they intend to do something with it. I can't imagine it's going to be a 12-hour God of War slash and hack fest that's over pretty quick. An RPG that's gonna, very narrative driven, lots of lore. Take your time. So, Prime, you are a big PUBG, kind of okay with Fortnite, a lot into Rocket League, yes, and you're currently salivating at the thought of playing a new Call of Duty, right?
That's right. As it says there, Blackout, which is
all of these things.
BR mode.
BR mode? Battle
Royale, sorry.
No, I knew that.
You just tested me. That's fine.
No, now I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
So we're doing all those things. Does it make sense in this day and age to develop a game? All those games are built on the fact that it's like what DB called a system. It's built on gameplay. It's built on competition. It's built on community rather than a long, drawn-out narrative that you kind of immerse yourself into a fantasy world. Is this kind of like, are these last gasp type things, or does it make sense from a financial perspective? Like, why do you think companies are still pursuing this when you can obviously make hand over fist just developing a gameplay structure and throwing in some dance moves and fancy skins?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're ever going to replace, you know, these quick games are ever going to replace totally, you know, everything. There's still room out there for these, you know, big sprawling epics. I mean, THQ Nordic, they do, I think they do still, I believe, Darksiders, the Darksiders series. I think 3 is supposed to be coming out if it's not out already. And they do what's the GTA type game, Saints Row, which they haven't done anything with that IP for a while. But that wasn't a big sprawling epic, but I mean it was a kind of a bigger game where there was lots of quests in it, and you know, you can, you know, they kind of maybe went a little bit silly on the silly side, you know, as they kind of iterated up, but you know, it was still, you know, a big open world game. And I still think there's, you know, there's room. Obviously, you have GTA, you got Red Dead Redemption coming out soon. You know, you got the Elder Scrolls game. I mean, you got Skyrim that's still what 8 7 8 years old, and you know it's still coming out for like every system known to man. So yeah, I think there's always room for these big epic games to come out. And you got if you want to get even bigger, you get all, you know, the online, you know, multiplayer games too that, you know, obviously do gangbusters. I mean, Warcraft's still going strong. They just released a new DLC, or I guess not DLC but expansion. So they'll still, you know, those games are still gonna always be out there in one form or another.
So Agascles, you know, Prime threw out a lot of games that, you know, it's obvious that the sprawling epic, you know, isn't an endangered species. Are we being too myopic to kind of like try to basically say this is? And you're the one guy that's kind of the bridge between the entertainment side and you know, you span the entertainment side to the gaming side of E2KG, and nobody sits there and says, "Oh man, they made this like kids movie. Why are they going out there and making this you know, Victorian period romance? You know, that doesn't make any sense." I thought people bought tickets to you know, Iron Man versus Spider-Man or whatever it is. So is it gaming has matured, and you know, hey, there's genres and different people have different tastes?
Well, the weird thing about gaming is I think gaming is just following a different evolutionary arc, right? It's very hard. I mean, I've studied or read about the industry for 3 decades now, and it's still hard for me to nail down and tell, like, when the gaming industry does X, is that an indication that it has become more mature, or that it's like redacted, or that it's regressed somehow, or if it's just its evolutions of maturity are kind of out of sync. And I think this is an instance where they're out of sync and out of series with the way other entertainment media have progressed. There used to be a time where we had very firm genres in the gaming world, and that started to disintegrate as we started to do a lot of convergence, right? So we pretty much the moment that we invented the action RPG, things started to become very muddled. And I think, you know, going back with Prime and DBQs through some of the older iterations of this podcast, we've sat on this podcast or predecessors to it and struggled with how to label a particular game, like which genre bucket does it fall in. But part of the problem with the business model evolution of games, in my mind, is that in games there seems to be, you know, you compared it to movies, and I definitely see that as an analytical litmus test. The problem with games is that there's this huge kind of pile-on mentality that occurs in the industry where, you know, when weirdly enough in Hollywood, when one team or group decides that this is the year to make a Wyatt Earp movie, that some other team somewhere, the same idea occurs to them, right? Or, you know, when somebody decides that they're going to make a big ensemble space opera, somebody else decides to do it. You know, we're going to make an Extinction Level Event Asteroid movie this year, and some other studio has the same idea. And that's kind of about as close as we ever get. But in the games industry, like, we get the Destiny-like thing, right? Where when one company makes a Destiny-like game, all of a sudden that's what everybody wants to do. And when one company made a Battle Royale game, all of a sudden that's what everybody wants to do. So I think the pendulum swing and the center of gravity and the force of inertia is much stronger in the games industry. So to me, and I'm going to double speak a little because I'm kind of thinking about this while I'm talking about it. I mean, I've gone on record as saying I don't know that it's a smart idea for everybody to chase the battle royale thing, because the market has shown that it's only willing to support 2 of those games at a time, right? Only 2 of those games are going to gain sufficient mass to really be going concerns as a business. And then everybody pretty much ignores everything else. So in one case, that was me arguing that other people should make investments like these, right? In Kingdoms of Amalur, in pumping more money into Final Fantasy 15, which you're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I think it's very risky, right? Like THQ Nordic, like, you know, laying out in a triple indie to pick up Kingdoms of Amalur. I mean, I applaud their bravery, but like, I just don't know. I mean, and the Kingdoms of Amalur property, in my mind, is it's a potential god killer, right? This is a game that IGN scored a 9.0. That's a review written by Colin Moriarty, who, although I think while he's out of the gaming entertainment, you know, media business right now, when I look back at his history, I mean, an incredibly critical eye for games. And it's a game that nailed down formats that now are spanned by things like the Souls games, as well as Elder Scrolls, right? I mean, it's a game that could have potentially put both of those series down as far as, you know, when it released in a given holiday season. So them picking it back up, and if they pick up the same studio talent and directive talent, it has the potential to be a big competitive force. I just don't know right now, like, which direction I don't want to see a lot of more battle royale games, but man, you know, putting out lots of dollars for the singularly single player experience. That's a big jump these days right now, and a big risk to take, I think, in some cases.
Well, it's funny, you know, how you mentioned, you know, when something comes up, you know, kind of popular, you know, people jump on it. And I think around the same time that Amalur had come out, you also had 2 Human, which is another same third person, you know, action adventure sprawling epic game, which I actually played and finished, and I actually liked that. But that was another one that kind of just fell off the cliff and just like bombed. You know, it didn't sell all that well, and I guess I had problems too, you know, during the development and all that. So I was, you know,
there was just so our viewers or listeners know, that was developed by Silicon Knights, and I think 2 Human was in like development hell for a long time.
Yeah.
So Silicon Knights made Eternal Darkness, and then they kind of took that theme and to make 2 Human, and I think 2 Human was originally conceived. I mean, I don't know if it was conceived originally for the OG Xbox, and then they finally released it for the 360. Is that accurate? I know it was in development for forever.
Yeah, I know it came out on 360. Yeah,
there's a lot of bickering back and forth between them and Epic about the Unreal Engine and the status of the level of support and what they were. Because I think when they originally started development, they were on the leading edge of that version of the Unreal Engine. And I don't know if they were using Epic as a scapegoat, but I know that was a lot. And I think there were a couple of lawsuits thrown around.
I think that they're not allowed to sell the game anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, so there was a lot of extenuating circumstances that may have impacted the sales.
Yeah, that was another one that was supposed to be a trilogy. You know, I think Amalur was going to be an MMO at some point too after that first game released, and you know that obviously fell apart. So it's just weird how that, you know, how those things come about.
Well, as Gascles mentioned, we have another story. So kind of, you know, Gascles is kind of questioning the wisdom in investing this much money into a single player experience. One of our other stories from gearnuke.com, Final Fantasy 15 sales exceed 8.1 million units worldwide. So it says, despite the fact that the game launched back November 29, 2016, the game opened to 5 million copies shipped in day 1, and now has surpassed 8 million units after the launch of the PC version in early March. The new update on the official Square Enix website confirms that the game has sold 8.1 million units worldwide. It launched with the Royal Edition for PS4, PC, and Xbox One in March 2018. This will be followed by a new Season 2 Season Pass 2 DLC that were released in early 2019, and they've announced a special anniversary celebration panel in November 2018. Not sure what that means, but the game is still moving strong. You know, I mean, I don't think Final Fantasy, in my eyes, like Final Fantasy doesn't seem to have the prestige that it did back in the glory days of the SNES and like the PS1, PS2 eras. I feels like it kind of trailed, like went down a little bit. But Final Fantasy 15 has come back strong, and that might just be my personal biases coming to light. But a lot of these games, you know, for all the talk that the single player experience is dead and everything, I personally I don't really think it's that much of a surprise that THQ is looking for like an IP that has a little name recognition and some good buzz behind it. With Cyberpunk 2077, there's been a lot of news stories lately about what the gameplay is going to look like. They had like 45-minute video. I watched the video? Did you guys watch the actual gameplay video for 2077?
I watched clips of it here and there. I didn't watch the whole thing.
So, I mean, definitely some narrative. I mean, like, I can see the shade, like the Witcher dialogue type. You know, it's just they're going to do a good job of making like a gritty world with some that will draw you in, but then they kind of combine it with some like first person, almost Destiny like shooter type stuff. So it'll be interesting. I really want to bring, so I mean, I guess obviously there's enough room for multiple types of gamers. But Prime, you mentioned GTA and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, DB, I'd also put forward Red Dead Redemption 2 as an example of, you know, a sprawling, epic potential game that's still on the horizon. But I don't know. I don't know if those are good examples, because is GTA currently the the Leviathan that it is because of the single player experience, or is it because of GTA 5 Online? And I imagine Red Dead, you know, people are going to pick it up initially for the single player experience, but it'll, you know, I am multiplayer component and everything. There is a multiplayer component, right?
Yeah.
That's going to give it, I think that'll give it life, you know, beyond. So, does Rockstar kind of have a better grasp of the market wherein they can make the epic game to appease those that like the narrative, but they also have the ability to leverage it for the competitive community gamer, for the long tail microtransaction whales, and maybe a pure single player experience isn't the way to go. Maybe the question isn't about narrative, and maybe it's about, you know, having heavy lore, but also like the ability to have fresh content. That pulls us in to your World of Warcraft, you know, example, because they're always updating it, obviously, and every 2 years we get a new expansion. And if Kingdoms of Amalur was looking at an MMORPG, that would be much more of that direction than like a GTA 5 Online or World of Warcraft than say comparing it to The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077, the CD Projekt Red stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know with GTA 5, I mean, obviously, you know, you have the single player story, and it wasn't, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was probably one of the shorter single player campaigns of all the GTAs so far that have been released. So now I don't know if they did that because they're trying to juggle, you know, three characters that you can, you know, swap between. So they kind of wanted to give, you know, each character their due, you know, their time in the spotlight. Or if maybe, like you said, maybe they saw something with all this online multiplayer stuff going on, so they're like, hey, let's, we'll put the single player, story out there, but we'll focus a little bit more on the online than we usually have in the past. And GTA 4, the game before it, obviously, it did have online, and I think it did okay, but it wasn't obviously as huge as 5's online multiplayer has been. I mean, I think almost every week they're releasing something, either it's like a car or skins or something that's always getting thrown out there. So that they're definitely starting to, I think, lean a little bit more that way. I played Red Dead Redemption a little bit. I think it had multiplayer in it, if I remember correctly, the first one. But I mean, that was definitely more the story. I was interested in the single player story at that point on the 360. So I mean, we'll have to see if 2 is the same way, or if they're trying to go the GTA route and kind of hey, we're going to give you a story, but hey, this is whole Western online business in the background that we want to push out to you, like we did with GTA 5. So I think it's kind of a wait and see to see how that's going to turn out.
All right, Agascles, we've kind of been, and unfortunately, in some respects, having our business hats on as we've been talking about all this. So we've been talking like, is it worth it to invest this much money in a single player experience? We've looked at a few of the other games that are completely just community driven, and some, as Agascles just talked about, some blends. But from a gamer perspective, and especially from you, what's the difference of investing 100 hours into a Destiny 2 or perhaps like a Rainbow Six, or Rainbow Six Vegas, versus 100 hours into an Elder Scrolls Skyrim, or your Cyberpunk 2077? I get the sense that you'd view them differently, because I know that you invested a lot of time in like your shooters, but you're not a big, story-driven guy.
So, as is often the case, I would disagree with your assessment.
Yeah.
I am a story-driven guy, and I'm a single-player guy. So I guess one table stake I would set is, when we talk about multiplayer, for me, that is predominantly wrapped around co-op. Like, I don't do a ton of PvP. That doesn't interest me as much. So the reason why you see me allocating those hours to co-op is because I like playing with my friends. When it comes to story-driven stuff and those experiences, I guess the difference is, and how I see that time allocation differently is I don't. How do I want to say this? So I guess this is a new term that's coming out. I guess on the streaming podcast, we'll want to talk about this. There's this new term coming out called variety gamer, right? Which I guess is a way that certain streamers are trying to brand themselves to make them distinct from the streamers who just play Fortnite for like 40 hours a week, and that's all their live streams are. And I'm definitely that type of gamer, right? I tend not to stick to a thing for a big block of time. I'm doing a little more of that, but generally I'm going to play a game for 2 to 6 hours, 2 to 6 hours, and then I'm going to rotate to something else in my backlog. So the reason why you see, well, I guess the reason for my difference in how I view those things are, Destiny is a thing that doesn't weigh me. Destiny 2, Destiny is a thing that doesn't weigh me down. I can get in, I can get out. If I choose to play for 5 minutes, I can. If I choose to play for an hour, I can. When I'm playing a game that is tightly coupled to the notion of progression, then I have to extract a certain amount of progression out of the time that I invest. I think one of the things you may be alluding to is, now this is a key reason why I might invest more time in progressing through a shooter than I do through a third-person action game. Primarily because third-person action games hinge very heavily on this notion of progression puzzles, which I don't like. And there's a lot of design dynamics in third-person action adventure games that result in bog down. And so I guess what I'm into from a progression standpoint is primarily linear progression, where if I'm going to make the effort to boot a game up, then I know if I'm going to invest an hour or 2 hours of game time, I can feel relatively assured that my character is going to improve in some manner over that 2-hour block of time, and I'm going to progress through the story. Third-person action adventure games, that tends not to always be the case. Big, open, wide RPGs, frequently, that's not the case. You can spend 2 hours in a game, and the grind doesn't necessarily, yield you a huge net. So, in terms of, being a gamer in this life and times, this is again why I know that there's a group of people that are going to love and dive deep into Kingdoms of Amalur 2 or whatever the Morpig was, that the MMO was that they were working on. But again, I know that there's a chunk of people that aren't. Cyberpunk 2077, if I get into it, I'm going to get into it because of its technical performance, but it's just not, I don't think I'm ever going to invest, the 60 hours or whatever it takes to complete, the single player campaign, in a straight thread. I say that I'm planning on jumping into Fallout 76 this fall, though, so my thoughts on that could change.
Well, I think you really uncovered a significant point, which is, in my admittedly limited brain, I've been thinking about things in a very stark contrast. Like, okay, I've got the story-driven game, and I've got the competitive game, and you've kind of drilled down onto a better taxonomy, I think, which is based on the progression model. And Destiny 2, yeah, there's a cool story. Everybody made a big deal about Cade 6, the events surrounding Cade 6, and
spoilers.
For you, yeah, spoilers. For you, the story, it's cool, but it's not the driving factor of the game. It's the gameplay and like you said, how you progress. In a game like The Witcher, I know exactly what you mean, because I don't really jump on that game for a certain amount of time, because I know by progressing it's going to be me completing quests, and I never know how long a quest is going to take, if I'm going to have trouble figuring out who I got to talk to next, or what widget I got to take from location A to location B, etc. So I can see how that can really affect your perspective on the game, and whether or not the narrative is strong is kind of a side element. Like, yeah, the narrative's strong, but you're not going to get as much of it if it's taking you too long to go through the quest.
Right, and that secondary part is what I would say it's not that I'm not interested in story, and as we're coming around to it, I think we're working around to what it really is. It's that the story has to be tightly coupled to the progression model, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about The Witcher and very large, big RPGs, one of my problems is that when you have side quests, that side quest may not really have much of anything to do with the story, and you may gain another hit point or something, but it kind of doesn't really matter necessarily in the open world. And sometimes it does, but it's often unclear how relevant it may or may not be. Destiny 2, progressing through the story was very important to me. I mean, I hammered the 23 hours of gameplay or whatever that it took to get through the single player campaign. And basically the only divert that I made was when the next mission was at a level above what I was at. So then I would go do patrols or a mission or two to pop up to the necessary level. Then I would swing back to the first player campaign. So, I mean, it depends, right? Like it's not that I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
How would you define that? So I would say The Witcher's that would be a quest-based progression. Like you're going to get a bulk of your advancement via the completion of in-game questing. And action RPGs, like your action RPG, like you said, that's a really hard one to define. Like your Horizon Zero Dawns, you're going to get most of your progression by kind of completing quests. You can putz around a little bit, but what would you say Destiny would be?
Yeah, I think it's it's a difference, and it's maybe an oversimplification. It's a difference between a highly linear progression model and like I said before, I think it's when the progression model is tightly coupled to the notion of story progression, right? When those are so loosely coupled that, right, because they're and you can loosely couple them in Destiny if you want. You can achieve level 20 and never complete the campaign. But I feel like these large, big, open RPGs, that coupling is a little more, that decoupling is almost a little more in your face. So I guess in a lot of ways, to me, it's the difference between a highly linear story and character progression model versus one that is, multi-dimensional, multifaceted, exponential, whatever, right? There's, an exponentially wide number of paths that you could follow through both character progression and story progression that eventually converge at a point. Whereas in something like Destiny, there's maybe 2 or 3, right, paths that you could follow. It's not as obfuscated, I feel like, as it is in some of those large open games.
All right, I'm trying to figure out some kingdoms or phylums for our new gaming taxonomy here, which brings me to my next question. As we're getting close on time, but where do you feel No Man's Sky fits into all this?
I was just thinking about that actually while you guys were talking. Well, I mean, I don't know if it was just with the next update, or it might have been the one before that. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Atlas, maybe. They did throw in a single player story in there, and I've been, for the most part, following that main story quest. I wouldn't call it like a grand story or anything, like an epic story. It's kind of it's kind of generic-y, I guess. So it's not like super involved. For me, with that, it's more just exploring and kind of doing more of the side quests and stuff like that. So, although like I said, I am going through the main story just because it seems right now that you're getting most of your item, well, not so much items, but the ability to make different items and stuff like that through the main quest instead of just finding them on side quests or buying them at a space station or stuff like that. So I think
you feel like you're able to progress. You can stop in there for 20 minutes and you can feel some accomplishment. Or do you ever feel like your time has been wasted?
No, I've never felt like my time's been wasted. You can always find something to do in there that has totally nothing to do with the main story quest. So I can buy a ship if I wanted to. I can build up my base like I was talking last week. There's things in that game that you can just totally concentrate on just one thing and you'd be totally fine with it. But there's actually a lot of stuff in there that it's just like I'm trying to juggle everything right now, and I had to, especially the first couple weeks that I was playing it. I was trying to do that. I was trying to do, all right, let me do a little bit of this, and then let me do a little base building, and then I'll do a little bit of exploring. And I was like, this is too much, so I had to just concentrate on just the base building for now. That's what I'm trying to do, and just stick with that. So it's more of like a Minecraft game where you can just kind of you make it your own. And I think we've talked about that in the past. You just do with it what you want. So yeah.
Well, but this concept of the progression model as the carrot is intriguing me.
It's more of an open world game. It's totally open. Too open, maybe.
So Agasicles, going from kind of like from what Prime said, I'm curious your thoughts on Monster Hunter World. This is a preview, perhaps, for tomorrow night's episode.
Yeah, so I'm very
interested.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in that, I wouldn't say that its progression model is tightly coupled to a story, but it also, it relies heavily on gameplay. I imagine you can jump in there and try to, grind away a little bit, but I know it didn't really attract much it didn't capture you like Destiny 2 did. And Is it just because the gameplay is not fun compared to like the shooter, mechanical shooter that is Destiny 2?
Yeah, so my big problem with Monster Hunter was the windup was just so long. Like I didn't have 3 hours to invest in a game that treated you like you were stupid, right? Like I mentioned, in the first, I think I played like the first couple hours, and like they bring you, this is the most like disgusting thing to me that I was expecting. Like they bring you to like your headquarters, your first base, and rather than the guy say, open your map and look at like these are the things that you can do in the town, right? You can go to the shop, you can go, like the guy actually physically leads you, like it's like 20 minutes of gameplay time with the guy actually physically leading you to each facility in your home base camp and explaining to you at each point like what you can do there. And I'm like, I don't have time for this trash. Like, and this is my big thing. Like it's a, you always mention, your limited time that you have for gaming, right? And my thing is, I don't have time to play a game and mess around, right? When I pop a game open, I need to know that I'm going to have fun, right? In a 30-minute time block. And the problem with a game like Monster Hunter World is like, I'm not guaranteed to have fun when I pop that thing open, right? I may just pop it open and do a bunch of admin. But on top of that, and sometimes admin is fun. DBQ and I we played Destiny 2 on PC last night, and we probably spent an hour doing inventory management, right? But that's a gamification thing for us that I've been into it since Diablo 2. But but another problem with these third person action adventure games is how much time do they remove control from you, right? So this is a thing that I struggled with in the first Tomb Raider. I was like, this game is cool, but like I want to vomit every time they wrench control away from me and have Lara like do something and crunch it down to this faux QuickTime event, right? Which is another reason why I'm staying away from Spider-Man, because I see those elements in there. But I think that it's also another element of it then is that deterministic fun quotient, right? Which sometimes I talk about, right? And people make all sorts of disparaging comments about racing games, but why do I like racing games? Because they have a deterministic fun quotient. Because I know when I pop open a racing game that if I've got 30 minutes to play, that's about enough time for me to run 4 to 6 races. Some of those I might have to do do-overs, but I know the experience that I'm going to get packaged into that amount of time. It's deterministic, and I know in that given amount of time, I'm probably going to unlock 3 cars, right? Or, make some level of progression in my career. And that's very useful to me. Now into live streaming, right? I already experienced, amounts of time dumped into an activity that sometimes yields 0 output, right? Because I wind up fighting a technical issue or a problem with the streaming service. So yeah, to me, it's a little about that. I think a lot of this conversation comes around to, and it may sound like a bail, but to me, because even for all these things that I say, they are not continuous over a lifetime, right? I will probably come back to Monster Hunter World when I am in a place that I feel in my gamer life I can accommodate that game. That will probably be a point where I don't have a lot of stuff to do in Destiny 2, right? Or Destiny, or a time when I don't have on my checklist that I need to get around to playing Rocket League with Prime, since now I have Rocket League on Xbox, right? So there will be a time for me to come back and work on Monster Hunter World. The big thing for me is that what we need to continue to get out of the industry is we need to continue getting diversity and variety. And what we need to not have is this huge pile-on effect where there's going to be a ton of battle royale games, right, in a very compressed amount of time. We look back at the first half of this year where we felt like there was this dearth of content that came out, and I would still stand by that hypothesis that we had, right? Through the first part of this year, there wasn't a ton of high variety, high diversity stuff that came out. Now we're getting into the fall and we're getting the pile on and the big rush, and we're getting some of that diversity. It would have been nice to have had that spread throughout the year, because now we're going to get crunched where we're not going to have time to get around to play everything. So, and I think that was highly driven by like the rush for multi-transactions, the rush for quick money and continuous money. and the effect that the battle royale stuff is having on the space. So, I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about, man, but look at companies like Ubisoft who like literally basically do one type of game now, right? Ubisoft basically doesn't do anything but big open world third person action adventure games, and a lot of them are very similar to each other. And I was about to get on their case about that, but then as I was thinking, I was like, but man, we need that, right? We need somebody doing that, because what we need is, what would be nice is if we had big publishers who maintain a stable of games and franchises across 6 to 10 genres, but we don't have that, right? So if a big given publisher is going to be the third person action adventure specialist, right? And I would claim that Sony Interactive Entertainment is also in that bucket. Then thank goodness we have them, right? I mean, if Activision and EA are going to duke it out about first-person shooters, then let them do it, and then let's praise EA for the fact that they're keeping the sports genre going, so we have that diversity as well.
No, these have all been. It's been helpful, this whole conversation, I think, because I came into it like with a mindset about the way we're going to discuss things, and it's always helpful to look at gaming and why we game, and this is kind of helping me to think about it in terms of more than just the oversimplified story versus whatever. As far as Ubisoft, you criticizing Ubisoft and then coming around to approving of the fact that they kind of do one thing and do it well. I think that's good. I'd rather a company be excellent at one thing than mediocre to good at a lot of things. You know what I mean? Then we get I think we get more gems than just your cotton candy type games that are fun for what they are, but not going to be as memorable. Prime, do you have any closing thoughts before we sign off? We're coming up, I think, probably about 15 minutes now, so I have a little time.
Yeah, I mean, just with Ubisoft too, they do the the third person action genre, and then they're starting to do these online-ish games with Rainbow Six and For Honor. I was trying to remember what the other game was. So they dabble a little bit, and they do the I guess if you want to call it indie stuff, they have the Ubi Art, I think it is, their engine or whatever it is. So they try to mix in, I guess, a few things in here and there. But obviously you have Watch Dogs, you have Assassin's Creed, you have what's the military shooter? I forgot now. Ghost Recon. So those are big Open world sprawling cities, and one in the past, one in the future, and one in the present, more or less. So they hit all the timelines. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how everybody's gonna bring everything about. And excuse me. And speaking of battle royale, obviously we have Call of Duty with Blackout, and we have a Battlefield with Firestorm, which I don't think they've really shown anything. They've just talked about it a little bit. So you get all the big dogs, as it were, starting to throw throw those modes into their normal games. And obviously Call of Duty is not having a single player story, but Battlefield still having their little war stories or whatever they call them. So, and even then, it's not, those are more of kind of experiences, not like a whole cohesive story. So maybe those guys are starting to kind of just flip everything to online, here in not too distant future. So we'll see what happens this fall and in the next coming year or so.
Yeah, I think that really brings, like, that comment kind of brings it home though to me. What Agassicles was saying with the everybody's chasing everybody in the games industry, and while a lot of these, when it boils down to it, like these sprawling RPGs, they might have some different gameplay systems or whatnot, but ultimately they're rather a lot of the same structure. You go from point A to point B, talk to whatever NPCs you got to talk to, and get your story fed to you. But with the story-driven games, at least the story can be unique, and Agastocles, you talked to the how'd you phrase it, the deterministic fun quotient, and for a lot of people, like those side quests and those bits of lore, are the fun quotient. You have a little bit of an archaeologist mentality for some gamers, and that's good. I think with Cyberpunk 2077 and Kingdoms of Amalur, we're probably looking at being able to tickle that intellectual curiosity for some gamers, even though it's a fantasy setting. When you have game companies like, oh, okay, battle royales, the zeitgeist, let's do it. Yeah, I think it cheapens the whole thing, and I don't know if there's enough creative innovation baked into it. Like I understand, like you might not reinvent the wheel as far as the way that an RPG is structured, but you can still have a profound amount of creativity just in your classic storytelling mode with character and plot, and the interactions between them. You're not really going to be able to get that with a battle royale game, and the storylines are just it's just background. So it would really come down to the gameplay and the deterministic fun quotient. Am I going to have a lot of fun when I play this? But as Agastocles said, there's only so much that the market can support. So I've almost come around in my head to saying these guys that are doing these story-driven games, if they can pull people in with the story, they're going to have some level of sales. And the fellows that are looking for the community competitive, fighting it out in that sphere, in that genre, it might be more of a cutthroat thing, and it's not really a question of, well, are story-driven games passé? It's more like story-driven games at least might have a niche foundation. They're always going to have the people that like it, but these guys that are competing in the competitive sphere, it's kind of an all or nothing proposition. So does anybody have any last thoughts before we sign off? Any announcements, plugs? This has been an interesting discussion. It's gone in different directions than I anticipated. That's why I think we have this format, E2KG Deep Dive. Tomorrow night is E2KG, the GX show, Grown-Ups Who Game. I believe it is Prime, Agastocles, and DB will be reporting on Monster Hunter World. I'm actually really eager to listen to that episode because, one, I know we have strong opinions on Monster Hunter World so far, and two, DB has seemed to indicate he's a little disappointed that he had to play it amidst all the new stuff coming out. So
he might have the same experience I had with Paladins, where he kind of didn't want to play. He wasn't in the mood, maybe. So we'll see how it turned out for him.
Yeah, I don't like go in thinking I'm gonna pick the worst game. Like I do try to pick like a game that'll either push somebody to play something a little different, or if it has some semblance of meaning. And we are the people that nominate the game, so ideally we wouldn't nominate a game that's completely horrible. But this should be an interesting discussion, just because I think Monster Hunter World baffles me. But that's tomorrow night. So Tune in approximately 9:15 Eastern, unless, hopefully we get the technical difficulties out and we can get around roughly on time. But fortunately, there's more than one way to put a podcast up. So for Cyrus Prime and Agasicles Stamus, I'm Swissguard. Thank you for listening and have a good night. Happy gaming.